Okay, so we know that there are two theaters of the war. We know that there's the European theater in Europe, and then there's the Pacific theater in East Asia. So this video is going to show us the expansion of the Nazi regime in Europe during World War I. Now, did we kind of start that with our last lecture series? Yeah, were y'all colored in the map of the expansion of Nazi Germany until what year? 1939, because that was the year the war started. Exactly right. So we are going to watch this video of a time lapse, day by day, of the territory that the Nazis took and then lost. So what I want you to think about while you're watching this video is, look at how much land in Europe and in Africa that Germany claims, that the Nazi regime, the Axis powers, claim. Then I want you to note the significance of the Normandy invasion. Was the United States involved in the Normandy invasion? Yes. Okay, where is Normandy? France. So the Allied forces stormed the beaches of Normandy. We have a specific day that we use to honor that amphibious attack. What do we call that day where the beaches of Normandy were stormed? D-Day. Exactly right. Was it a turning point in the war? Yeah, so up until D-Day, who was winning? The Axis powers. But then afterwards, we see a switch.
Abgeordneten, ich habe Sie erst heute Morgen um 3 Uhr einberufen können. Dank der Organisation, Flugzeuge, Leitstelle, Schiffbahn ist es gelungen, einen großen Teil der Abgeordneten rechtzeitig voranzubringen.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date that will live in infamy.
Der Kampf von der Bürger mit Polen. Luftwaffe erinnert zum auslosen Einsätzen die Widerstandsländer und zahllos überspielende Aktionisten Luft in Lebensverteidigungsmittel. Lange Zeit auf unserer Bewertung. Fähig über den Augenblick gekommen, um wieder zum deutschen Volk sprechen zu können.
United Nations have inflicted upon the Germans great defeat in open battle and the night. Our air offensive has seriously reduced their strength in the air and their capacity to wage war on the ground.
This is the part of World War II that was fought in Europe. What was the other theater? The Pacific theater, exactly, where Japan dominated. So in this video, we saw how Germany dominated until the invasion of Normandy, known as D-Day. And then in another video we're going to look at the Pacific theater, where Japan dominated until the atomic bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So I want you to look for some specific things in the Pacific theater. Number one, look for Japanese expansion into China. Okay, so Japan is going to expand into China just like Germany expanded into Poland. You should also look for a strategy utilized by the United States. This strategy or tactic was called island hopping. So the island hopping strategy, where would that go on your chart? Under tactic. Now, why would they use the island hopping strategy in the Pacific, but not in Europe? Yeah, it's the mainland in Europe, right? It's just a part of the continent. Whereas in East Asia, you have a lot of islands. You have down here in Southeast Asia and then up here by Japan. So that's going to be a better strategy to undertake. But if you're going to be island hopping, what technology do you think they're going to need to help that strategy? Aircraft carriers, because that's how the fighter jets get airborne, through the use of aircraft carriers. Exactly right. But the last technology that we're going to see demonstrated in this video is the technology that ended the war with Japan. Does anyone know what I'm talking about? The atomic bombs. Exactly right. Now, was the US targeting military installations with those bombs? No, they were targeting cities, civilians. Exactly right. For what purpose? To end the war quickly. They wanted unconditional surrender from the Japanese. The Japanese government did not want to unconditionally surrender. Surrender was seen as deplorable. And so the American government made the decision of, do we extend the war in the Pacific and keep sending soldiers there and keep island hopping and maybe lead to a stalemate? Or do we establish a decisive, rapid victory through the dropping of this new technology that had never been used before? So this is going to wipe out hundreds of thousands of people, literally vaporizing them to the point that their shadows are imprinted onto the surroundings around them. Like if you Google what's left after an atomic bomb, people after an atomic bomb, it shows their shadows imprinted into buildings and concrete because they are literally vaporized from the atom bomb. Now, with the use of this new technology, now that the United States has access to atom bombs, what does everyone else want? The same thing. Have y'all heard the phrase, don't bring a knife to a gunfight? Yeah, well, now you see the United States has this nuclear technology, and it is devastating. So everyone else, including Russia, is going to want to make some of that technology themselves. So this is going to start a new war between Russia and the United States, known as the Cold War, where they engage in an arms race to get as many weapons stockpiled as possible. And they also involve a space race. Who makes it to space first, the US or Russia? Russia on the Sputnik. Okay, but who makes it to the moon first? The United States. Now, once they've stockpiled enough nukes, blow up the world 7 times over, do they stop? No, they continue to stockpile weapons because it is an arms race. So are y'all ready for this video?
December 7th, 1941, a date that will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan.
Harbor, the Japanese have just officially laid down their arms. They have signed terms of unconditional surrender.
Okay, so looking at this slide, we see two cities. Now, civilians live in cities, do they not? Yes, so were civilians targets in this war? Absolutely, because this is a what war? Total war. Civilians are involved in mobilization on the home front. That means they can also be targets for enemy soldiers. So with this, we see what German tactic with bombing. It is firebombing, but what is it specifically if it's German? Blitzkrieging or blitzing. So we see the tactic of blitzing or firebombing. Now, this wasn't just done by the Germans, it was also done by the British. So we see this tactic utilized by both of these nations, despite being on opposite sides of the war. So what technology would they need for this blitzing or firebombing? Aircraft, like the Luftwaffe with Germany, and bombs, okay, long-range bombs. Now, most of these aircraft carriers would fly into enemy cities at night. Why would they fly in at night? Exactly right. There was anti-aircraft rifles, anti-tank rifles, and so they shoot those airplanes out of the sky if they could see them. And that's going to be a lot more difficult at night. And it's also going to be a lot easier to attack with your bombs and your blitzing if you're flying in under the cover of night, but then the people in the city are using light sources. Because will those light sources be a guide for you to drop your bomb? Yes. So a tactic that civilians used to undermine firebombing was implementing mandatory periods of blackout. So turning out all the lights, blacking out the windows. The purpose of this was to prevent successful blitzing. So where would that go under your chart? Under technology or tactic? Tactic. Okay, mandatory blackouts. Play the sirens. Everyone would have to close their blinds, turn off their lights, so they don't make it easy for the enemy to drop bombs on them. So what rapidly ended the war in Japan? The atomic bomb. And what do we call that day where the United States won in the Pacific? VJ Day, victory in Japan. Exactly right. So in this slide, you have two questions. Now remember, first thing that you do with prompts is you read them, and you read them carefully. You break them down, figure out what they're asking you to do. So I want you to read prompt 1 and prompt 2, and I want you to tell me how these questions are different. Now looking at prompt 1, it says using the documents describe how the U.S. military influenced U.S. industry. What historical thinking skill is being used there? Look at the verb, influenced. Causation. So how did the military affect the U.S. industry? Now look at the next question. Describe how industry impacted the U.S. military. What historical thinking skill is here? Also causation, because of what verb? Impacted. So they're both using the same historical thinking skill, but they are using it differently. So in the text box, explain how these questions are different and how that difference would influence the correct answer for each of these questions. So we've established causation. Question 1 asks how the U.S. military influenced the U.S. industry. Can we answer that with yes? No, you can't just repeat the question. You can't say that the U.S. military did influence U.S. industry. Of course it did. Otherwise, they wouldn't be asking you the question, right? If I told you to describe my class, you wouldn't just reply with, yes, it is. You'd have to describe like, oh, we do lectures, or oh, we do this, or we have projects, so on and so forth. You can't just repeat the question to answer the question. So the first question asks, how the military affected industry. Okay, so this is like dependent variable versus independent variable. They are switching them in these questions. One is a cause and the other deals with effect. So in question 1, the military is the cause. We have to see how the military caused effects on the industry. So who has a potential answer to that? How did the military influence industry in the United States? Yes or yes? Exactly right. They actually changed what was produced, because this is a what kind of war? A total war. So you're not just mobilizing your military. I mean, that's what everybody does in a war. You mobilize your military. But you're also mobilizing your civilians for the home front. You're also mobilizing your finances by selling bonds and getting people to donate. And you're mobilizing your industry, because before the war, industry would be involved in making, I don't know, pots and pans, right? Supply and demand, invisible hand, regulating the market. Now they're not doing that. Now the government and its military has taken over industry to produce what? Munitions. Exactly right. They are producing things for the war effort. So the effect of the military on industry is that it changed industry. It literally changed what it produced. Now looking at the second question, how did industry impact the military? Okay, so you can't say, oh, the military impacted what industry produced. Now it's swapped. What did industry do that had an effect on the U.S. military, or what was that effect? Do you think this was a positive effect or a negative effect? A positive effect. Industry became an advantage to the military because what was industry doing for the military? Providing munitions, supporting the war effort. Okay, so those answers can sound kind of similar, but the questions are asking different things. The military caused what to happen to industry? It changed what it was producing. Industry caused what to change for the military? The military was getting more weaponry. Following the Industrial Revolution, we see factories putting out these more modern, advanced technologies for the purpose of warfare. Right? So the United States didn't want to be involved in World War II, but they did have a side. Who did they want to win in the war? The Allies. And so the Lend-Lease program made all these submarines and these tanks and these aircraft and sold them not to Germany, but to Britain. So could that be industry impacting foreign military? Yes. So you can make that argument. All right, so in this picture, we see the tactic of kamikaze pilots. So where are you going to put that on your worksheet? Yeah, under tactic or methods or strategy. Now, can anyone tell me what a kamikaze pilot does? Yes, Rhea? They did. So kamikaze pilots would essentially commit suicide in attacking the enemy. Now, these kamikaze pilots specifically attacked whom? Exactly right. They attacked the aircraft carriers and ships at the Naval Military Station of Pearl Harbor. Does anyone know where Pearl Harbor is? Hawaii. Exactly right. Okay, so the United States was not involved in this war, but Japan wanted to attack them to intimidate them, show them their might, to get them to back down and not join the war. Did it work out that way? No. It made us angry, right? So December 7th, 1941, Japanese kamikaze pilots attack Pearl Harbor. Now, how far away is Hawaii from Japan? Yeah, quite a ways. After they attack Hawaii, can they just stop and fuel up and then fly back home? No. The goal behind these kamikaze or divine wind pilots was to do everything in their power to serve their emperor and their country, even if it meant giving up their life. Now, some cultures may look at suicide bombing as a negative or deplorable thing, right? But is that how the Japanese viewed the kamikaze pilots? No, they viewed it as an honorable thing. And how can we tell that from this image? There are students, there are kids. Are they jeering or hissing or booing? No, what are they doing? They're waving, saluting, cheering, and waving flowers. So this is seen as a positive part of the war effort. They are waving at a kamikaze pilot who is about to literally give everything for his emperor and his country. But the response that comes from the United States is going to devastate Japan, notably in what technology? The atomic bomb. Yes, Rhea? It depends. There's home front and then there's battlefront. But you bring up a good point, and the fact that this is a total war, are civilians off limits? No. So whereas the Japanese, with their kamikaze tactic, attacked a military naval base, right? So they're attacking specifically military infrastructure, not civilian infrastructure. We're going to see a difference with the atomic bombs. They were industrial cities. Hiroshima or Hiroshima, however you'd like to pronounce it, and Nagasaki are attacked with this brand new modern technology. So look at this picture on the far right. This is the city prior to the atomic bomb. What's this snake-looking thing here? A river. What might be over here in these orderly squares? Houses, suburbs. Over here, do we see kind of like a park? And then over here, big factory or something like that. Lots of infrastructure, roads, a bridge. You see all of these signs of a living, thriving city. And then the atomic bomb. What do you notice in comparing those two images? Yeah, the second image is desolate. It is devastated. It has been atomized. Everything has been burned down to rubble and to dust because that was the impact of these nuclear weapons. Okay, people just vaporized right off of the face of the earth. All right, and then we also have Hiroshima outside of Nagasaki. So if you look at this image, what do you notice? There's nothing. I mean, you do see some trees, some leftover brambles, right? And then you see a couple of buildings. But is that wide open space indicative of a city? No. Here we see that it has been leveled. It has been flattened with these atomic bombs. So where are you going to put atomic bombs on your chart? New technology. These cities were industrial cities, so they could argue, well, yes, there are civilians, but they are technically involved in the war front if you're looking at the home front, rather than explicitly targeting citizens or civilians for the purpose of making an impact. So maybe they gave themselves some moral distance in making the decision, because it is a hard decision. I mean, literally hundreds of thousands of people dying. So under technology, you should put the atom bomb. Is this the last we're going to see of atomic bombs? No, because now that everyone knows they're possible, what does everyone want? They want atomic power. Starts an arms race. And now looking at this slide, I know it looks like a lot, very colorful, maybe a little overwhelming. But when you see charts like this, all you got to do is break it down. First step, what is the name of this chart? World War II deaths. Where are the Allied powers in this chart? Near the top. Where are the Axis powers? Near the bottom. What does the red indicate? Military deaths. What about the orange? Civilian deaths. Exactly right. So red is military and orange is civilian. Now looking at this pie chart, who had the most civilian deaths? The Allies or the Axis powers? The Allied powers. They make up over 50% of the deaths in that pie chart. And then their military makes up a fourth, right? So we're looking at over 70% of the deaths occurring with the Allies, whereas only 17% occurs with the Axis powers. So is there a huge disparity in that? Absolutely. So now that we've broken down the chart, this is what this color means, this is what this chart means, I want you to answer the following in the text box. I want you to tell me what Allied power lost the most civilians, had the highest civilian deaths. So are we looking at the top of the chart or the bottom of the chart? Top. And what color are we looking for? Orange. So which of those Allied powers has the most orange? Because that means they have the most civilian deaths. It can only be one of two answers, right? What are our two possible answers? China and the Soviet Union. So everybody take your fingers. Your left finger, I want you to put on the left-hand side of the orange on China. Your right finger, put at the end of that orange. Once you have that link, hold it up to Russia. Who has more civilian deaths? China. China has the highest number of civilian deaths. Why do you think that might be? Why were so many civilians killed in China? They do have a high population, but who was killing the Chinese civilians? Japan, right? And were they killing a lot of them? Absolutely. Y'all, Japan, like Germany, carried out a genocide. Okay, whereas the Germans perpetrated the Holocaust against the Jews and the Roma and homosexuals and communists and the disabled, the Japanese are going to perpetuate a Holocaust against the Chinese. Okay, this is known as the Rape of Nanking. This is extremely brutal invasion of China, to the point that generals in the Japanese army had a competition to see who could behead the most Chinese civilians. And it was published in a newspaper, keeping track of the numbers of people that they had beheaded. So the Japanese are going to be extremely brutal towards the Chinese in this invasion. Now, did the Japanese government admit to these war crimes? No. It is still a point of contention in which they have not acknowledged the crimes that were committed during World War II against the Chinese as well as the Korean population during this war. Next question. What Axis power lost the most military? So what color are we looking for? Red. And where on the chart are we looking for it? The bottom. So tell me, what Axis power lost the most military? Was this a hard question? No. What's the answer? Germany. Now, what Allied power lost the most military? The Soviet Union. Y'all, Soviet Union lost the most people total in sum. Okay, they are going to sacrifice quite a few people in order to fight the Nazi regime. Okay, so we see a lot of civilian deaths, particularly against the Allied powers. So what technology or what strategy, and you can use your chart from your notes, what technology or strategy led to higher civilian deaths in this war? How were civilians getting killed? Are chemical weapons like mustard and tear gas being used against civilians? Not so much. Unless you're talking about Zyklon B gas, which was used in the gas chambers against the Jewish population. Those are civilians. So if you're talking like machine guns or something on the battlefront, that's different. Okay, when we talk about civilian deaths, we're talking about non-military personnel. Now, the kamikaze pilots, when they attacked Pearl Harbor, were they attacking a military installation or a civilian infrastructure? Military installations. I would not use kamikaze attacks for civilian deaths. So give me an example of technology or strategy that led to more civilian deaths. Just one. Atomic bombs. That killed civilians where? In Japan, in Hiroshima or Hiroshima, and in Nagasaki. Did it wipe out a large number of civilians? Yes. What else was used to target civilians in this total war? The Blitzkrieg. Who used the Blitzkrieg? The Germans. Did they attack cities like London? Yes. Now, were they using atomic bombs? No, because who had atomic bombs? The United States. So they were just dropping regular bombs or long-range missiles when it came to the Blitzkrieg. What did the British do to German cities? Firebombing. Exactly right. Again, targeting civilians because this is a total war. In terms of genocides, were civilians killed in that? Yes. What two genocides do we have in World War II? The Holocaust against the Jewish population, the Roma population, the disabled population, the homosexual population, the communist population, and the socialist population. Okay, lots of enemies of the Nazi regime. And then what about the other genocide? Yes, Japan against the Chinese with the rape of Nanking. So again, we are using documents. You have to use the document. You don't have to use both. This question specifically says using one of the documents. Describe the varied methods. Well, what historical thinking skill do you think you're going to be using here? It says varied. Yeah, it's different, so you're using comparison. So describe the different ways governments conducted the war. What are some methods, some strategies that governments used in World War II? Now, you have to use the document. So can I say, oh, the U.S. government used the atomic bomb? No, because do these sources support that claim? No, there's nothing in there about the atomic bomb. So let's look at source A. Indian troops parade with anti-tank weapons. Wait a minute, India. I thought, where was World War II fought? Europe and in the Pacific theater. So why would India be involved in this European war? Yeah, they're colonies. They are a colony of Britain. In World War I, did the Europeans exploit their colonies not only for resources like raw materials, but also for manpower? Yeah, so World War I, the colonies were used by the Europeans for their war. And in World War II, same thing is going to happen. They are going to use their colonies for manpower. Okay, so if we're talking about a government in source A, which government are we going to be referring to? The British government, because India was a colony. Now that's going to change after World War II. Are the colonists sick and tired of fighting for these faraway foreign countries? Yes, so after World War II, we see a movement for decolonization. Particularly in India, we're going to see who lead the movement for independence. Yep, Gandhi, exactly right, using non-violent methods of protest. Do they work? Absolutely, they do. So after World War II, we are going to see decolonization, so the end of new imperialism. Now in source B, who made this poster? The United States. So this is a United States poster made by the United States government. So you have the British government and the methods they used to conduct war, and the US government and the methods they used to conduct war. So pick one of these documents to answer the question. And make sure you're using the source. So let's start with document A. One method that the British government used to conduct World War II was what? The use of the colonists, exploiting their colonies for manpower. Did this war involve India at all? No, but the British needed manpower. So in addition to pulling from Britain, Britain is also going to pull from their colonies. So could we use that as a method for source A? Yeah. Also for source A, what are these troops using to conduct war? Anti-tank weapons, an anti-tank rifle, and Molotov cocktails. Okay, both of which are going to come from industrialization. To create guns, you need factories, right? You need to manufacture those weapons. Molotov cocktails use alcohol. Do you need to manufacture that? Absolutely. So, did the British government use colonies? Did the British government use industry? Yes. Okay, now source B. A lot of y'all put that source B was an example of what? Propaganda. Is this positive or negative propaganda? Is positive. Because who is it depicting? Russia. Are the Russians and the United States on the same side in this war? Yes. Both of them are fighting the Nazi regime. So even though Russia is communist and the United States is capitalist, they are going to side together for the same cause. Now, how do you know that it's positive towards the Russians? It says friend, your friend who's fighting for freedom. So is this trying to use political image to boost morale and to support the war effort? Absolutely. Now, are the United States and Russian governments going to remain friends after World War II? No, because they're going to get into a proxy conflict known as the Cold War. Exactly right. All right, last slide, y'all. Pick two of the nations listed and compare. If it says compare, it's talking about similarities, right? So tell me some similarities between these governments' methods of conducting war. So what's similar about a method by Great Britain and Germany? What's similar about a method between Germany and Japan? Pick two and tell me a similarity. Don't just say, oh, both of them fought on the same side. That is not answering the question. The question is about methods, similar methods of fighting this war. Who's got one they'd like to share? All right, both the United States and Great Britain mobilized their industry to conduct the war, okay, because their industry was used to produce what? Goods, right? So Britain and the United States, did both of them mobilize women in their factories? Yes. Did Japan do that? No. So you see a similarity there. Who has another example? Aaron. Yeah, you have targeting of civilians. The British firebombed German cities like Dresden, and the Germans blitzed British cities like London. What about Japan and Germany? Do they have anything in common? No, Germany did use women. Mm-hmm. Yes, Aaron. Extreme nationalism and war crimes, genocide in conducting their war, or ultra-nationalism. Was the United States ultra-nationalist? No, that would be Germany and Japan.